The pen in Lydia Crane's manicured fingers clicked once before she slid the document toward me across the polished conference table. The room smelled faintly of eucalyptus cleaner and tension. "We're making some difficult decisions, Mara," she said, her tone syrupy and insincere. "This is about streamlining the budget and preserving core talent. You're one of our most valuable engineers, which is why we're offering you the opportunity to stay at a revised compensation rate." Her eyes glittered with condescension as I glanced down. 65% reduction. Not a typo. My $120,000 salary down to $42,000. After 9 years building their most efficient sensor calibration algorithms, this was what I was worth to them. I read the number twice, then once more. Each zero seemed to echo. "This takes effect next quarter," Lydia continued, tapping her nail on the signature line. "We'll need your acknowledgement by Thursday." There were 3 other executives in the room. Mark, VP of Finance, who wouldn't meet my eyes, Selena, HR, with her corporate empathy face plastered on, and Felix, the golden boy director Lydia was grooming for her own succession, who smirked just enough for me to notice. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. "I understand," I said softly, folding the paper. "I'll review this." Lydia smiled like she had already won. "That's all we ask. We're hoping you'll see the long-term value in staying with the Vynatech family." Family. That word twisted like a knife. As I walked out of the glass-walled room, I could see my reflection layered over the company's mission statement etched on the far wall. Innovation, integrity, impact. I almost laughed. Integrity? They just cornered me like an animal and smiled while doing it. 9 years. 9 years of all-nighters, debugging code until sunrise, traveling cross-country to salvage client contracts. 9 years of patents filed under the company's name. Every one powered by software I'd written. But they knew something else, too. They knew about Ethan, my 10-year-old son, and his spinal therapy that insurance barely covered. They knew I couldn't just walk away from stability. They knew I was tethered. That's what made this personal. I stepped into the parking lot, the damp Seattle air chilling my hands as I clutched the paper. They'd miscalculated one thing. I'd been preparing for this exact move. I'm Mara Ellison, by the way. Senior systems engineer, or I was until Vynatech decided I was too expensive. Single mom, 2-bedroom apartment north of Lake Union. My life had been one long equation of balancing motherhood and corporate ambition, and for years I'd told myself loyalty mattered, that showing up would mean something. It didn't. Still, as I sat in my car staring at the offer, I didn't cry. I smiled, because buried beneath their arrogance was opportunity. Let me rewind for a second. I joined Vynatech when it was nothing more than a mid-tier hardware startup trying to compete with giants like Nextcore and Luminar. My specialty was calibration software, the digital brain that taught sensors to measure microscopic imperfections in semiconductor chips. When I started, their rejection rate was 18%. Within 18 months, my system dropped it to 3%. That change alone saved them over $12 million annually. By year 5, my software suite, internally known as Calyx, was being licensed to 3 other manufacturers. Vynatech had gone public, and my department became the profit engine of the company. And yet, my biggest raise? 5%. I swallowed the resentment because I believed in what I was building. I believed in the idea that good work gets recognized. But that illusion cracked the night I walked past the executive lounge during last year's investor gala and overheard Lydia say, "Mara's brilliant, but she's not leadership material. She's too technical." Too technical. Translation: too useful to promote, too inconvenient to replace. That was the night I started quietly documenting everything. Source code versions, development logs, screenshots of time-stamped work done for my home lab setup. I knew my employment contract claimed ownership of anything created using company equipment during company hours, but most of Calyx's advanced modules, particularly the neural feedback algorithm, had been coded from my kitchen counter at 2 a.m. while Ethan slept in the next room. My breakthrough version, Calyx NX, wasn't even on their servers. Yet. 3 months before that humiliating restructuring meeting, I'd met with a patent attorney, Derek Vale, who'd helped me file provisional patents under my name. I'd been playing defense, while they thought I was playing catch-up. So when Lydia handed me that pay cut offer, I wasn't broken. I was calculating. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, I spread my work journals across the kitchen table. My apartment smelled faintly of soldering resin and coffee, a familiar comfort. On the wall, a whiteboard filled with equations stared back at me. In the bottom corner, Ethan had drawn a tiny robot saying, "Mom, supercode." "Mom?" His voice came from the hallway. He patted out in Star Wars pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Why are you still up?" "Just finishing something for work, buddy." He frowned. You look mad. I smiled, closing the laptop. Maybe a little, but it's a good kind of mad. He tilted his head. Like when you beat the boss level? Exactly like that. He grinned, satisfied, and went back to bed. The next morning, I sat through another meeting where Lydia announced new efficiency measures while sipping her oat milk latte. Every phrase was corporate poetry for, we're cutting staff and crushing morale. I nodded along, keeping my face neutral, while inside, I was writing an entirely different kind of plan. That afternoon, I met Derek at a small cafe near the waterfront. I told him, sliding the paper across the table, they finally made their move. He scanned it quickly. 65%. That's not restructuring, that's punishment. I know. Then it's time, he said simply. Your provisional patents are ready to convert. Once you authorize, they're yours, publicly filed, legally protected. I nodded, signing the final authorization. Do it. Derek smiled faintly. You've got them exactly where you want them. Not yet, I thought, but soon. That night, I drafted an email. Not the one Lydia would receive. That one would come later. This was to Zypher Technologies, Vynatech's quiet but hungry competitor on the East Coast. Their CTO, Raymond Cho, had reached out 6 months ago about my calibration methods. I hadn't responded then. Now I did. Subject, proprietary software collaboration proposal. I attached a summary of my independent patents and hit send. As I closed my laptop, I caught my reflection in the dark window. Steady, calm, unbroken. They thought I'd cut my worth by 65%. They had no idea they'd just handed me leverage worth millions.
2 weeks after signing the new agreement, my pay had officially shrunk. My badge still scanned, and Lydia Crane's smiles had grown wider. That alone told me she believed I had accepted defeat. In her mind, I was the compliant engineer, too cautious to quit and too desperate to rebel. Good. Let her think that. On the surface, nothing changed. I showed up at 8 a.m., logged my hours, attended briefings about strategic innovation realignment, and sipped the same bitter break room coffee while everyone else avoided eye contact. But under the surface, everything was shifting. Zypher Technologies had replied within 24 hours. Raymond's message was short but potent. We're interested. Confidential call? That first conversation happened on a Wednesday night after Ethan fell asleep. Raymond's voice was calm, deliberate, but there was an edge of excitement beneath his restraint. I've read your provisional filings. If those patents hold, they'll disrupt half the precision sensor market. I leaned back in my chair, watching the glow of the monitor. They'll hold, I said. I've got time-stamped logs, data trails, and source control proof. Vynatech can't touch them. Good. Then what do you want, Mara? The question lingered. What did I want? Money? Revenge? Both maybe. But what I really wanted was acknowledgement. To have my work associated with my name, not buried under Lydia Crane's leadership credits. I want partnership, I said finally. Joint integration, exclusive testing rights for Calyx NX, and confidentiality until I choose to go public. Raymond didn't hesitate. Done. Send me the framework. We'll route everything through a shell contract, non-compete safe, legally airtight. That's how it began. Every night after Ethan was asleep, I worked under the soft hum of my desk lamp, refining Calyx NX's architecture. I sent encrypted builds through a private cloud key, disconnected from anything tied to Vynatech servers. The irony was poetic. The company paying me less than half my worth was funding the power build for the technology that would destroy them. Days blurred into each other. By morning, I was the model employee, nodding through presentations about synergy and cost alignment. By night, I was rewriting a next era of semiconductor calibration with Zypher's back-end engineers. Then came the quarterly operations review. Lydia stood at the head of the glass conference room, clicking through slides while Mark muttered metrics. As you can see, she said brightly, productivity has stabilized post-restructuring. We're on track to meet Q4 targets. Stabilized. That word was code for we gutted half the team and no one's complained yet. I glanced at the pie chart glowing on the wall and almost laughed. The data she was bragging about came directly from algorithms I'd built, algorithms she devalued by 65%. After the meeting, Felix caught up to me by the elevators. Rough few weeks, huh? But hey, at least you still have a job. I looked at him steadily. You should be more careful with your assumptions. He laughed. Assumptions? About who's really holding this place together. His smile faltered just long enough to give me satisfaction. By the following Monday, Zypher's legal team had finalized a contract under the shell name Eclipse Dynamics. My compensation was disguised as consulting fees. Legally separate from my day job, Raymond transferred the first installment, $85,000. I stared at the notification on my screen and exhaled slowly. The plan was no longer theory, it was motion. Still, revenge had to be timed, not rushed. I wasn't here just to leave. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted Lydia Crane to read my letter with shaking hands, realizing she'd orchestrated her own downfall. The first domino fell when Vynatech's primary client, Next Core Industries, requested an emergency recalibration fix for their defense defective chip batch. The bug was traced to a modification Felix had greenlit without review. Lydia, of course, ordered me to quietly resolve it. I fixed it in 3 hours, documented everything, and sent her the update. Except this time I routed the patch through my personal server first. The metadata logs would later prove that the most recent working version of Calyx was built outside company servers. Proof of authorship, carved into code. That night, as I sat with Ethan helping him build a Lego rover, he asked me, "Mom, are you winning?" I smiled faintly. "Almost, kiddo. Just one more level." By week 6, Zypher had fully integrated Calyx NX into their testing hardware. Their trial run reduced defect rates by 92%. Raymond's email was almost gleeful. "You weren't exaggerating. We're preparing for full-scale acquisition." My pulse quickened. Acquisition meant headlines. Headlines meant exposure. Exposure meant Vynatech's board would realize their overpaid engineer had just handed their biggest rival that technology they undervalued. But it wasn't time to go public yet. I wanted the timing perfect, right when Vynatech announced their annual investor showcase. Lydia had been preparing for it for months. It was her big moment, her climb to COO, and she built it on the illusion that my work was hers. So I waited, biding time, keeping up the charade. On the Friday before the event, I received an internal memo. All senior engineers must submit summaries of their current development projects by EOD for executive review. It was signed by Lydia herself. I smiled. Perfect. I spent that evening crafting a document so clean, so precise that no one would question it until they did. The summary outlined every feature of Calyx NX with minor alterations that pointed subtly to independent development. It looked harmless until you checked the version histories. Anyone tracing the metadata would find it originated from Eclipse Dynamics. I attached it, hit send, and shut down my workstation. Monday morning, the chaos began. Lydia's assistant stormed into the lab, flustered. "Mira, did you, change any repository credentials last week?" I shook my head. "Not that I know of. Why?" "We can't access the main Calyx database. Everything's locked." "Strange," I said, masking my satisfaction. "Maybe IT's running maintenance." Within hours, the panic spread. Systems offline, license keys invalid, production halted. Lydia's voice echoed through the corridor, sharp and furious. "Who authorized the migration?" I stayed silent, watching the storm unfold from my cubicle. Later that afternoon, I received an email from her, short, brittle, and furious. "Come to my office, now." I closed my laptop calmly, stood up, and walked down the hall. My pulse didn't waver, because tucked inside my bag was a letter she'd never forget.
Lydia's office looked different that day. The blinds were half drawn, the sunlight slanting across the glass table, where the chaos of printed reports and coffee rings told me she'd been fighting a losing battle for hours. She didn't look up when I entered, just gestured sharply at the chair across from her. "Sit." I did, quietly. Her voice was low, clipped, the kind she used when she was close to snapping. "Do you want to tell me what the hell is going on?" I tilted my head. "You'll have to be more specific." "Don't play dumb, Mara." She threw a folder across the table. Screenshots, error logs, audit trails. Calyx's access credentials were changed. The main server backups are corrupted, and our clients can't verify authentication signatures. The entire system's frozen. The only person with root-level credentials was you. I stared at the folder calmly, my reflection shimmering in the glass. "That's interesting," I said, "considering I haven't touched the core repository in over a week." Lydia's eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to me. IT traced the last modification to your workstation." "My workstation," I said slowly. "That's been remote linked by half your junior engineers for the last 2 months, because you keep assigning them my debug tickets." For a split second, uncertainty flickered across her face. She hated that I was right. I leaned forward slightly. "Maybe you should check who actually accessed it." Lydia inhaled sharply through her nose. "I know you're angry about the salary adjustment." "Cut," I corrected. "Let's call it what it is." "Fine, but this," she gestured wildly to the reports, "this isn't how you fix it." I smiled faintly. "Who says I'm fixing anything?" The color drained from her face. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. Silence stretched between us, heavy and deliberate. Outside the office, the muffled sound of footsteps and frantic voices filled the hallway. The company was unraveling in real time. "You have no idea what kind of legal trouble you're walking into," Lydia hissed. "You signed an IP clause. Everything you've ever built here belongs to Vynatech." "Everything I built for Vynatech, sure, but not what I built outside it. Not what was created off network, on my own equipment, on my own time." She blinked. "What?" "The neurofeedback module, the adaptive calibration core, the entire NX system you've been showcasing to investors." I paused, letting the words sink in. "That's mine, legally and factually." Lydia's composure fractured. "You're bluffing." I pulled an envelope from my bag and set it on the table. "You can check." She hesitated, staring at it like it might burn her. "What's this?" "A letter," I said simply. "You'll want to read it before the board meeting." Her hand trembled slightly as she tore it open. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a certified patent confirmation, stamped, dated, and filed under my name. Calyx NX Autonomous Calibration Framework. Inventor, Mara Ellison. The second was a resignation letter, effective immediately, with a courtesy copy addressed to the board of directors and human resources. "You filed patents under your own name?" she whispered. "Months ago, while you were too busy cutting salaries to notice who was actually writing the company's future." Lydia's breathing quickened. "You can't... This is intellectual theft." "Only if the company owned it," I replied. "But I checked the contracts. Anything created outside work hours on non-company devices without direct compensation is mine. I even had it notarized." She stood up suddenly, panic flickering behind her polished demeanor. "Do you have any idea what this means? You've just sabotaged the company." "No, Lydia," I said, standing too. "You sabotaged it the day you decided loyalty was cheaper than respect." I turned toward the door, but she spoke again, desperate now. "You'll never work in this industry again. I'll make sure of it." I looked back at her, calm as still water. "You might want to check who's hiring before you make that promise." Her confusion deepened just as my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my pocket, turned the screen so she could see. A new email notification from Raymond Cho, Zypher Technologies. Subject line, "Welcome to the team." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You..." "Yes," I said. "Your rival's newest director of systems innovation. Funny, isn't it? Turns out they value what you discounted." Her jaw tightened. "You can't transfer proprietary technology." "You're right," I said, stepping closer. "But it's not proprietary anymore. It's patented, independent, and theirs now, under a licensing agreement signed this morning." Her expression crumbled. "You sold us out." "No," I said softly. "I cashed out." I left the office as she stood frozen, clutching the letter like a death notice. Outside, the corridor buzzed with whispers. Word was spreading fast about the system crash, the lost access, the mysterious patents filed under my name. Mark from finance shot me a look as I passed, half curious, half terrified. Selena from HR stopped mid-sentence when she saw me, eyes darting to the envelope still clutched in Lydia's shaking hands through the glass wall. I didn't slow down. I took the elevator to the ground floor, the doors closing on the chaos above. The second I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. It smelled like rain and freedom. I walked to my car, dropped my badge on the passenger seat, and exhaled for the first time in months. Ethan would be home from school in 2 hours. We'd order pizza, watch a movie, and maybe, finally, sleep without the weight of compromise pressing on my chest. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed again. Another email, subject line, "Zypher announcement draft." I opened it, scanning the first line. Zypher Technologies announces acquisition of independent calibration system Calix NX, developed by newly appointed Director of Systems Innovation, Mara Ellison. I smiled. The headline would hit the press by morning. And when Lydia Crane opened her inbox tomorrow, she'd see exactly what kind of letter I'd left her. By morning, my name was everywhere. Bloomberg, TechWire, The Verge, Seattle Business Journal. All of them carried the same headline. Zypher Technologies acquires groundbreaking calibration software from former Vynatech engineer. Every article used a photo of me from an old conference panel, smiling, blazer sharp, eyes confident. I hadn't felt that version of myself in years. Now she was back. Vynatech's official statement hit the news feeds 2 hours later. It was short, defensive, and desperate. "We are aware of recent reports regarding intellectual property formerly associated with our operations. Vynatech retains all necessary rights and will pursue appropriate action." Translation? Panic. I could picture Lydia in her office, voice raised, calling lawyers, threatening IT staff, demanding explanations. But there was one thing she couldn't undo. The patent filings were public record. The timestamps didn't lie. I owned Calix NX, and Zypher owned exclusive licensing rights. It was airtight. That morning, Raymond called me. "You've caused quite the stir," he said, amusement in his tone. "Half of Silicon Valley just called me to ask how we pulled this off." "Tell them you hired someone who knows her worth," I replied. He chuckled. "You're going to fit in here perfectly." Zypher wasted no time. They flew me to Boston that weekend, set me up in a glass-walled office overlooking the harbor, and gave me a small team of engineers who actually listened when I spoke. The culture shock was immediate. No passive-aggressive smiles, no veiled threats, no loyalty tests. Just results, respect, and breathing room. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was creating. But freedom has an echo, and mine came 3 days later in the form of a phone call from an unknown number. I answered out of instinct. Mara Ellison, I said. Silence at first, then a voice I knew too well. You've ruined everything. Lydia. Her tone was cracked, the venom gone, replaced by something that almost sounded like disbelief. Do you have any idea what your little stunt did? The board's furious. We've lost NextCore. The stock dropped 8% overnight. Actions have consequences, I said calmly. You taught me that. Don't get smug with me, she snapped. This isn't over. We're filing suit. You won't get away with this. You'll lose, I said simply. Your own legal team confirmed the ownership clause last quarter. Remember the compliance audit? I kept the email. There was silence on the other end. She remembered. You think you're some kind of hero, she said finally, but all you did was burn bridges. No, I said. I built new ones. And I hung up. That was the last time we spoke. Or so I thought. Weeks passed and Zyphra's prototype launch was approaching. Calyx NX was performing beyond expectations, reducing calibration time by 90%, cutting production waste to near zero. Investors were calling it the AI of hardware refinement. My inbox overflowed with invitations, interviews, and offers. One evening as I was reviewing system performance data, Raymond appeared in my doorway. You should see this, he said, handing me his tablet. On the screen was a forwarded email from Zypha's legal department. The subject line, Cease and Desist, Vynatech Industries. I skimmed it. It was the corporate equivalent of a tantrum. Pages of legal threats, demands for injunctions, accusations of breach of fiduciary duty. I smiled. They're bluffing. We know, Raymond said. Our lawyers already drafted a response. We're not backing down. Good, I said, handing the tablet back. Let them fight ghosts. A week later, the lawsuit hit the federal docket. The media latched on immediately. Headlines screamed, Corporate War, Zypha versus Vynatech. Tech analysts called it a case that could redefine intellectual property law. But behind the noise, I stayed calm. I had evidence, emails, timestamps, signed confirmations, all showing Calyx NX was conceived and developed independently. Every proof, every version history, every patent submission bore my digital signature. I'd covered every angle before the first shot was fired. On the morning of the preliminary hearing, Lydia arrived flanked by 2 lawyers and a PR handler. I sat across the aisle with my counsel and Raymond. When the judge called the session to order, Lydia's team dove in first, accusing me of stealing critical proprietary code. My attorney waited patiently, then stood. Your Honor, if I may. She walked to the bench, placing a thick binder in front of the judge. These are notarized development logs, server timestamps, and patent office confirmations, all filed before Ms. Ellison's alleged misconduct. Additionally, the code in question was never stored on Vynatech systems. The judge flipped through the evidence silently. Lydia's expression faltered, her confidence bleeding away with every page. The session ended with the judge scheduling a full review, but not before remarking, preliminary evidence favors the defendant. Translation, they'd lost the opening round. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Miss Ellison, did you steal Calyx from Vynatech? Do you think this will end your career? Are you and Zypha retaliating? I kept my answers short. I didn't steal anything. I just refused to be silenced. That night, my inbox exploded again. Messages from engineers across the country, mostly women, thanking me for standing up to corporate exploitation. One wrote, You showed them we're not disposable. Another said, Your story got me to quit my job today. I'm starting my own project. Reading them, I realized something. I hadn't just won a fight for myself. I'd started a quiet rebellion. The next morning, Zypha announced the Calyx NX launch date, 1 week away. The teaser video went viral overnight. Clean shots of the system at work. The tagline glowing across the screen. Precision reimagined, powered by Calyx. It didn't mention my name, but it didn't have to. Everyone already knew. That same day, Lydia resigned from Vynatech. The board blamed her for the collapse. Investors pulled out. The company's stock continued to plummet. She'd built her career on other people's brilliance, and when that brilliance walked away, the empire fell with it. By the time the dust settled, Zypha had tripled its valuation. And me? I was finally earning what I was worth. But more than that, I had something Lydia Crane never did. Peace. Still, As the headlines faded and the chaos quieted, a question lingered in my mind. What happens when victory becomes silence? Because sometimes, when the storm passes, you realize you've spent so long fighting that you've forgotten what calm even feels like.
6 months later, I was standing on the TEDx stage, lights blinding, applause rolling like thunder. The screen behind me flashed the title of my talk, Reclaiming Innovation: What Happens When You Stop Asking for Permission. My hands were steady now, my voice even. I spoke about the system that tried to bury me, about the quiet ways ambition gets punished, and how sometimes the only way to win is to burn the script they hand you. The crowd was silent when I finished. Then came the standing ovation, slow, rising, unstoppable. In that moment, I realized something profound. Revenge had been the beginning, not the end. After the lawsuit, Zyphra settled into dominance. Calyx and Axe became the industry standard. Companies licensed it worldwide. My name was on every patent, every contract, every press release. For once, I wasn't the ghost behind someone else's success. I was the story. But with every win came a strange kind of stillness. The adrenaline of survival had faded, leaving behind space. Empty, quiet, foreign. I didn't know what to fill it with. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I found myself walking along the harbor, the same view from my office, but softer now. Twilight blurring the city lights into streaks of gold. I thought about Lydia, not with anger anymore, but with curiosity. What drives someone to steal credit for others' work? Fear? Insecurity? Or the belief that control equals power? Maybe she'd been taught the same lesson I was, but she chose the wrong side of it. A notification buzzed on my phone, a message from an unfamiliar number. You don't know me, but I wanted to say thank you. I used to work under Lydia. I left Vynatech after you did. Now I run my own startup. You gave me courage. I stared at the message for a long time. That was it. The missing piece. The quiet after victory wasn't emptiness, it was freedom waiting to be used. The next week, I proposed something new to Zyphra's board, a mentorship initiative for underrepresented engineers, especially women pushed out by corporate politics. They approved it instantly, naming me director of the program. We called it the Ellison Initiative. Within months, we had dozens of mentees, brilliant minds who'd been overlooked, dismissed, underestimated. Watching them thrive, I saw versions of myself at every stage. Young, hungry, doubted. I told them the same thing Raymond once told me. Build something so undeniable, they can't erase you. One afternoon, while reviewing project proposals, Raymond stopped by my office. You ever think about what's next? He asked. I smiled. Always. You could run this place one day, or start your own. I laughed softly. Maybe both. He grinned. Jam, just don't forget us when you do. I promised I wouldn't. Months later, during a quiet night flight to a major tech summit in Berlin, I looked out the window at the endless stretch of stars and thought back to where it all began. The conference room at Vynatech, Lydia's voice cutting through my ambition, telling me I wasn't ready for leadership. She was wrong. I wasn't just ready. I was built for it. Because leadership isn't granted. It's taken by those who dare to believe they deserve it. When the plane landed, I turned my phone back on. Another message was waiting. An invitation from a major university to deliver a commencement speech. The subject line read, "Your story inspired our graduating engineers." I smiled, typing my reply. I'd be honored. On stage, a month later, I faced hundreds of students stepping into their futures. I told them, you'll meet people who'll try to shrink you, people who'll make you doubt your worth, your vision, your fire. Don't fight to prove them wrong. Build something that makes them irrelevant. The auditorium erupted in applause. As I walked off stage, someone from the audience called out, "What happened to Vynatech?" I paused, turned back, and said simply, "It collapsed from within. Turns out you can't build an empire on stolen blueprints." They laughed, but I didn't, because I knew the truth. Revenge had started as fire, but it ended as clarity. It wasn't about payback anymore. It was about rewriting the rules. And as I stepped outside, camera flashes lighting up the night, I realized the final irony. Lydia tried to erase my name, but in doing so, she'd immortalized it. Her downfall had written my beginning. I walked into the cool evening air, a soft wind carrying the echoes of applause, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was running towards something or away. I was exactly where I was meant to be.